Some parts of today's episode contains elements that are sensitive and might even be triggering for some listeners, so we encourage you to listen with care.
Often parents will say, well, let us work it out and maybe then we'll tell the kids. But what ends up happening then is the kids find out and the parents say, well, we're okay, so you don't need to worry about it. But then the kids say, well, but I'm not okay because this is something that happened and this is something that's difficult for me to process as well, to see my father or my mother in this new light, which is why I always say that the sooner that you can tell, particularly your adult children, what's going on, the more you're going to be able to preserve that relationship and the more you're going to be able to heal as a family.
Good day, friends. Jonathan Daugherty here with another episode of the PSR podcast, which is a listener-supported outreach of Be Broken Ministries. In today's episode, I'm excited to have back on the program with us Melissa Macomber to explore the often overlooked impact of parental infidelity on adult children. Melissa shares her own personal journey of discovering her parents' affair as a teenager and how it shaped her well into her adulthood. Together, we discuss how secrecy, family roles, and betrayal affect trust, relationships, and even self-expression later in life. Melissa also introduces her online program called Authenticity After Family Betrayal, which offers hope and community to adult children still carrying this hidden pain. Her message is clear: healing is possible, and you are not alone. To learn more about Melissa and her online program, visit melissamacomber.com. For additional resources, visit bebroken.org or check out links that we're going to put in today's show notes. And of course, I'm always going to ask you to rate and review the podcast after listening because it does help others to find it. Now let's dive into today's helpful and hopeful conversation with Melissa. Well, all right. We have back on the program with us Melissa Macomber. So Melissa, welcome back to the program.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here again.
Yeah, exactly. So we had you on, I think, early last year, and we had you on to tell your story because there's some unique elements. Well, let's just say you were bringing out some elements that are not always common that we hear about, but usually it's kind of like a secondary conversation or maybe further on down the road that we discover that here's an adult who's dealing with whatever struggles they might be having in their life, and there might have been roots in their own parents' infidelity of various kinds when they were children. And so we had you on to kind of share your story. We called it Understanding the Impact of Parents' Infidelity on Adult Children. Well, when we had that conversation, you were kind of in the beginning of forming what this ministry is that you have now and really trying to create a program that can help. And that's what we're going to kind of talk about today. But can you just tell us, kind of recap a little bit for us of how you got to this space of healing in your life, but then also kind of felt the tug to help other people in the same kind of situation?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Well, my story started as a teenager when I discovered my own parents' affair, which was difficult in so many ways. But I wasn't really able to appreciate the impact of it until I was in my 20s. And that's when it really started to affect my life in a bigger way. And it took quite a while for me to process that experience. And part of that processing was I started to write about it, and I started to write a memoir, which is I'm still working on. But in the process of writing that memoir, I thought, well, let me reach out to other people doing this work and see what they're saying about how a parent's affair may affect the kids of any age, really. And I couldn't find anyone, or I couldn't find many people talking about it, which sort of baffled me, honestly, because as the more research I did, the more I realized that this affects adult children of any age, as I said, really everywhere, all over the world, and in just huge numbers. So it really confused me. So I decided, well, maybe this is one of those situations where I'm being called to do something because I've had this experience, and I also was trained as a therapist, and so have some experience there. And that's when I started blogging about the topic and doing more research, and eventually worked into building this online support community for other people who went through what I did.
Yeah, that's so good. And we're going to definitely kind of peel back the layers on that and dig into that. But, sometimes when people hear this term infidelity, like in a marriage relationship, they think only of like the betrayed spouse and the couple. So what gets missed in the impact on the children, even later when they're adults?
Yeah, it's a really good question, because so many parents I know try to also protect their kids from the infidelity or the affair. So the way I like to think about it is that when people get married, they form a commitment, right? They form a promise to each other, and any betrayal of that promise, by definition, extends to the rest of the family, to the children, and so they end up feeling that betrayal in a similar way, not the same way, but in a similar way, have a lot of the same doubts of, gosh, was my childhood a lie? What was really going on? Can I trust my parents? Can I trust what they're telling me? All those kinds of questions. And it's often exacerbated, unfortunately, when the parents try not to share it with their adult children, because then the adult child has to deal with it, or even the older teenage child has to deal with it alone. And that just makes it even more difficult to process and to heal from.
What do you think? I mean, because obviously you had your own experience, but also you've done a lot of research now in this area. Mm-hmm. What are some of the reasons, do you think, that parents believe that withholding or kind of hiding that part of their brokenness is actually helpful to their children? Maybe what are some ways that can be revealed in a healthy way?
Sure. No, I mean, it's a good question, because I would never advise parents to share every detail. I mean, that would never be something that, I don't think any child would want to know those intimate details about their parents.
Or could even handle that, right?
They probably couldn't even handle it. Yeah. They wouldn't be interested. And I think parents often believe that it is something between them, and so they should protect their kids from their difficulties. And often parents will say, well, let us work it out, and maybe then we'll tell the kids. But what ends up happening then is the kids find out, and the parents say, well, we're okay, so you don't need to worry about it. But then the kids say, well, but I'm not okay, because this is something that happened, and this is something that's difficult for me to process as well, to see my father or my mother in this new light. Which is why I always say that the sooner that you can tell, particularly your adult children, what's going on, the more you're going to be able to preserve that relationship, and the more you're going to be able to heal as a family, which is equally important.
Yeah. Now, on your website, you actually describe some common experiences like feeling invisible or unchosen, or even responsible for everyone else's emotional well-being. Why do some of those patterns tend to emerge after there's been family betrayal like that?
Yeah, I think often, particularly adult children and older teenagers, fall into these family roles as a way to cope with the infidelity and to try to help the family. So they may observe, for example, that the betrayed parent is really suffering, is having trouble emotionally, is maybe even having trouble getting up and going to work. And so then the child, in an effort to help, will sort of swoop in and become an emotional caretaker and take on a level of management that's really meant for a parent, that's not meant for an older teenager or even an adult child, because an adult child has their own life and their own family and their own work and priorities. So, and what will happen is, so for in a crisis situation, maybe that's okay. But what ends up happening sometimes is that role just continues and becomes a pattern, and people start to rely on it in the family, that this adult child will just be the one who takes care of everybody. But But eventually that becomes quite a burden on the adult child.
Yeah, I'm hearing, I can imagine there's a lot that just dovetails with what we have learned in like attachment theory and some of
Mhm.
those kinds of things.
Mhm.
Can you talk a little bit about how when there's maybe multiple children, they're not all going to necessarily have the same reaction to the
Mhm.
same event?
Mhm.
Can you talk about that and how that even creates sibling dynamics among adult children?
Sure. No, and that can be a really hard one for parents too, because they'll observe rightly that not every child within the same family is going to have the same reaction. It depends a lot on the child's age when they find out, the gender of the child, their sort of natural temperament and the way that they view the world. So that can be a real challenge for parents having to manage, say, three different kids in a family who have three different sets of opinions and ideas, and trying to find a way to be honest with each one of them in the way that is most helpful for that child and most age appropriate for that child is definitely a challenge. I can't minimize that, because that is a challenge.
Yeah. And how can things like because this has got to also be common, I would think, among adult children, teenagers and adult children who've experienced an affair in their parents. How can things like secrecy, denial, or even the idea of like keeping the peace surrounding such an
Mm,
affair, how can that actually start to affect that person's ability to either trust themselves or others later in life? You've
mm,
touched on this a little bit, but
mhm,
specifically those things, because secrecy, denial, or let's make
mhm,
sure it looks like everything's okay. What kind of effect does that have then on adult children later on in their own, like you said, they've got their own families, their own life, whatever.
mhm, mhm. Sure. Yeah, that's a big one. As someone who's helping to manage the secret in a family about an affair, you want to make sure that none of the conversations, say over Christmas dinner, get anywhere close to anything that could uh, reveal anything about the infidelity. And so you get very good at managing the sort of internal part of you gets very good at managing conversations and managing what you say and what you don't say. And what happens over time, and this happened to me personally, what happens over time is it becomes just something that you do. And you almost don't realize that you're doing it with other people. You get very good at not sharing things that might be controversial or conflictual, or saying what you really feel for fear that it would hurt somebody else's feelings. And while none of those things, those are all part of our interaction as humans, when it starts to affect how you as a person share your own truth and your own opinions and your own needs, say in a relationship, it can get really sticky if you're constantly afraid that sharing your true self is going to get you into trouble.
Yeah. Well,
Mm-hmm.
and in our ministry, we're dealing with individuals, adults, in our men's ministry and our wives' care ministry, who are coming to us because, hey, it's a man who's got a porn problem or a sexual addiction. It's a wife who's experienced the sexual betrayal of broken covenant in her marriage. Um, how what is it what are some of the linkages maybe or connections between some of that type of brokenness in an adult's life that maybe seeds were planted because of what occurred in their childhood, keeping in mind I don't play the blame game. We all
Sure.
ultimately are responsible for our decisions, but there are factors that shape us, that mold us, that kind of create patterns of how we are thinking. We were just talking about that, right? we
Mm-hmm.
we maybe learn to be secretive and deny because, well, that's kind of what we saw in our parents when they thought we weren't looking, right? So can
Mm-hmm.
you talk about how sometimes the adult child's own sexual brokenness story
Mm-hmm.
is not necessarily completely disconnected from their parents' sexual brokenness story?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I could probably do an entire podcast on just this particular topic, because it's really fascinating to me. I've read so much research, so much scholarly research about this topic, because it's been studied from the 1980s up until the most recent study I read was out of Turkey in 2025. So it's been studied around the world, and there is definitely a connection between growing up with a parent who cheats and being predisposed to, or being more likely to cheat or be cheated on in your own romantic relationship. Now, what's missing from all of this research is that there's no direct causation, right? Like if this, then that. There's no, you can't say, kind of to your blame game, you can't point and say, yes, this is the blame for that at all. But what I see is it is that just the patterns, that the patterns that you observe as a child in your family are, and we all do this, right? And not just with relationship patterns, but with all different kinds of patterns that you observe in your parents, and then you do them as you grow up, because that's what we all do. We mimic what we see. So if you're observing these patterns of dishonesty or secrecy or betrayal, you're going to have to really think about it in order to not do it. Even if you don't believe that it's the right thing to do, you still need to really question that behavior as an adult to make sure that you don't fall into that pattern.
Yeah, it's almost like, we can certainly agree, hey, we are, especially as adults, we're free agents, right? We have agency.
100%.
But in the same breath, we can't say, and your entire childhood environment was completely inconsequential to
Right.
who you are as an adult. It's like, no, it may not be strict causation, but it is absolutely influential, right? In establishing patterns in our lives. With that being said, so maybe as adult children begin to discover, maybe there's some of our listeners even now are going, I never even thought about this. I realized there was that big secret in our family, or I kind of knew about this. And anyway, there can be a sense of maybe guilt for like setting limits because they go, I don't feel safe with my parents or family members or whatever. So how do you distinguish between like what are healthy boundaries versus like punishment or revenge or just like cutting someone off impulsively?
Yeah. Oh, that's a really, really good question. And that is something that most of the adult children I've ever spoken with have struggled with, because most everyone who comes to me doesn't want to cut off contact with their family. They very much want a relationship with their family. So it's figuring out how to do that in a way that allows you as the adult child to still have a relationship that feels good to you with them, still be able to be honest about who you are and what you believe, while also making room for the fact that everyone's human, and that, your parents aren't just going to do what you want them to do because you want them to do it. Like you can't make somebody be who you want them to be. So it's leaving room for that too. I think it really has to be, it can't be a one size fits all approach. You have to really think about what kind of relationship you want with your family, what kind of relationship they want with you, and try to negotiate that in a way that is as compassionate and honest as possible. And that really can look different for different people. For some people, a low contact relationship is, one visit a week. For some people, it's one phone call a month. It's really varied, and trying not to get stuck in these like definitions of what a relationship should be. Yeah.
Well, can you share with us maybe a little bit of what that looked like for you, and kind of maybe trying to establish health in your own family?
Sure. Yeah, it was a lot of hard conversations. I'll be honest. It was a lot of me sitting my parents down and saying, this is how I feel, and this is what I see, and this is what I'm comfortable with and not. And they had to do the same thing with me. And we weren't always aligned, for sure. And sooner or later, I had to get to the point for myself, and I can't speak for my parents, but I had to get to a point for myself where I just said, you know what, this is where we are. And I'm not going to waste any more time with fighting or trying to create something that may not happen. I'm just going to enjoy it for what it is, and also be able to take the time that I need to have my own family and my own relationships, and shift my focus, perhaps, is a good way of saying it.
Yeah, that's good. So, and since we're talking about this, especially a little bit about trying to at least repair or manage the family dynamic after there has been discovery, disclosure, whatever, and you're trying to work through this as an adult child. Let's talk let's talk to the other side of the equation. Can we talk for a little bit to the parents who actually did have the affair or the let's talk first about the parents who are saying, I I'm repentant. I want, like, we are seeking healing on our marriage, and they're maybe listening to this and going, how do we repair with our kids? What would you say to the parents? What's the posture? What's the best way for them to either
Mm,
initiate or respond in order for that there to be healing in that parent-child relationship?
mhm, mhm. Well, first of all, bravo, because that is a real. I don't mean to say it's a hard decision to make, but it's acknowledge it's difficult to have these conversations with your kids, and so
It's
being
humbling,
brave.
right?
It's
There's a lot of
humbling.
humility that
Yeah,
you must have.
thank
Yeah.
you. That's a better word. Um, and I give parents who are willing to take this on so much credit because it is so difficult. Well, I would say the first step is always, full ownership, full honesty. I know this is something that you talk about in your groups and programs as well. That really owning the behavior. If again, not every detail, but it's more about owning the hurt that was caused to the family and to the children, and really being willing to sit and listen to your child's pain in a way that is really just listening, not trying to be defensive, not trying to um, change their story, even if you don't agree with their story or how they're feeling, just listening to them. Those two steps alone will get you halfway there, at least. And from there, the third step I would say is often adult children feel the need to set up some boundaries, either with the amount of time spent or with the location of meeting up, or I mean, there can be a lot of them. But generally, I would say respect the boundaries, and don't that respecting the boundaries is patience is faster in this case, because you're teaching your adult children by respecting their boundaries that that's a way that you rebuild trust with them, because you're demonstrating to them that you can listen to them and respect their boundaries, and that will eventually lead to a stronger relationship, even though it may
Yeah.
be rocky and painful at the beginning.
Yeah. Now we also live in a very real broken world, and we know that couples split up over an affair, or one partner leans in, the other leans out, even if they stay married, or it's just kind of
Sure.
limping along. There's lots of different
Mhm.
scenarios that can happen after there's been infidelity in a marriage. So thinking now about the adult children, what does it look like for, like, what if they have a parent who, like, is unwilling to confess or admit any wrongdoing, or they may never receive an apology from their parent. So what does healing and emotional freedom look like for them?
Mm, yeah, that is that is the big challenge, I think, and that is honestly why most adult children seek me out. That because they've tried already to have these hard conversations and to get that kind of validation from their parents, and they haven't. So the way I like to say it is, truth is just not on the table. So how do they move on? And that's a combination of things, and that's really why I started this program, because it is a combination of getting some validation and support from other people who understand. It's a combination of figuring out what your boundaries are and how to uphold them in a way that is both firm and compassionate. And then how to get some of the support and the honesty that maybe you're not getting from your parents, from other people, from other sources, other communities, that kind of
Yeah,
thing.
and that's honestly, Melissa, that's why I am absolutely excited and thrilled about what you're doing, because
Mhm.
you're actually attempting to create safe spaces for these very adult children to come
Mhm.
into and share their stories and be able to maybe get that support when they feel
Mhm.
like they've been on an island, maybe even with their own siblings. They feel like they're on an
Mhm.
island because they might have a different perspective or different relationship with their parents.
Mm-hmm.
So, the program that you've created, you call authenticity after family betrayal.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you mean by authenticity in this context? And like, how does that help someone in this healing journey?
Sure. Well, what I heard most from the adult children that I interviewed is that their biggest struggle is how to be able to be themselves with their family, while still be with their family, like without cutting off contact or without not having a relationship with their mom or dad. And so that is the goal, is that they come out of the program feeling a stronger sense in their own story, like really validating the pain for themselves, because I think that often the larger culture around us will tell adult children, oh, that's your parents' problem, or you should be over this already. This isn't really your thing. So starting with a place of validation that, yes, this did hurt and this was a betrayal. And how do I be authentic about that and be honest about that, while also then being able to have the relationship with my family that feels good to me, and be able to then be able to move on from it. So I'm not spending all my time and energy worrying about managing my boundaries and worried about what lies my parents may or may not be telling me. How do I move on from that so that I can focus on my own relationship, my own nuclear family, my career, whatever it is that they have in their own lives?
Yeah, it's hard to feel whole when you're kind of living divided, right?
Yes.
Where you got this whole part of you that's going, I don't know where or with whom I could ever talk about some of these things, because there's this sort of compartment in my life that was founded and started by this massive pain that happened in my childhood. And I'm trying, even with my friend group or maybe even at work or whatever, I'm trying to be present as a whole person, but there's still this part, not saying that you share these things at work or whatever, but you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah. Oh,
To
yeah,
walk
absolutely.
around in your life divided is a very
Yes.
painful, heavy place to be.
Yes, absolutely.
So can you kind of walk us through the program? Tell us what maybe somebody can expect, with what you're offering through this program.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, love to. So it'll start on September 8th, and it will be fully online. So it'll be done over Zoom, and it'll be a couple of sessions a week that will include both education component. So what I would say, some of the hard skills of starting and having a hard conversation. How do you set boundaries and hold boundaries? What are some of the roles in your family, or some of the roles that adult children typically fall into in a family after a parent cheats? So there's this sort of education component. And then the other component is a structured group support session. And that's really the chance for people to be able to share their story, if they choose, with other people in the group who really understand, without fear of judgment or bringing any shame on themselves or their family. And the goal of the group would be to really help adult children release the pain and the weight of a parent's infidelity, so that they can move on with their lives and not continue to hold this weight, even if their parents aren't able to change, aren't able to take ownership, that they can still move on and experience that sort of freedom from it, regardless of their parents. And the other thing I want to add is, one of the things that's built into the program is a full year of the group support, because my feeling is that throughout maybe everybody doesn't need support every week, but throughout the course of a calendar year, so many things come up. I mean, the holidays, just for one, family vacations, different family transitions, births and deaths and illnesses, all of those can kick up more feelings or more need for boundaries or more hard conversations. And I just think it's important for people to have that kind of support for a longer term.
Yeah, I love that. I love what you're doing there. So as we start to kind of land the plane here, I'm thinking of the adult child who maybe they're just now starting to acknowledge how deeply, or maybe even discover how much they're still carrying of their parents' affair. what would you want to say to them? And maybe especially if they're carrying feelings of like shame for thinking, why is this still affecting me? I'm 35 years old and why is this thing still about,
Mm.
that type of weight? What just hope would you give to that person?
Oh gosh, that's a great question. You're not alone. You're so not alone. I will admit that when I even started this whole building this course, I often wondered if I was alone, if I was the only one who felt this way. And I can tell you with 100% certainty, you are not alone. And the other thing I can tell you with 100% certainty is that healing is possible. Like it's not a life sentence. You don't have to keep struggling or denying that this affair affected you. You really can release it and move on. It is absolutely possible.
That is so good. Well, Melissa, as always, this has been a great conversation. Where can our listeners and viewers go to learn more about you and this program coming up?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. The best place to find me is my website, which is melissamacomber.com. That has all the information about the group. And there's a link there that you can sign up for a free consultation call with me if you want to just find out more about the group and see if it might be a good fit for you.
Yeah, well, we are definitely going to put all that in the show notes. But Melissa, thank you again for being with us and just sharing your story and just sharing what's been on your heart to help other people in the same situation.
Well, thank you for this opportunity. I really appreciate it. Great talking to you.
Yeah. Well, listeners and viewers, we are going to put that link in the show notes. So September 8th is just around the corner. So don't waste any time. If this sounds like something that's resonating with you and you want to take that next step, reach out to Melissa and she can get you plugged in to that program. But we're always glad that you've been with us. We want to help you take your next best step to wholeness in Christ. And we look forward to seeing you back here again next time on the Pure Sex Radio program. Take care.